Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to get into a bit of trouble by talking about everybody's favorite subject, and that's forced diversity in the creative arts. A subscriber recently reached out with both an article and a video from Film Threat about the forced diversity check boxes going on in the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, which is for writers doing film and television in Hollywood. And they're doing surveys in order to hire people of certain demographics on purpose. And so I wanted to add into this discussion because the guys over there talked about, how it was in that industry. And if you see it in places, talk about it in places. And I have seen this in the writing industry for a very, very long time. I'm sure that it has been in the television industry, but I just wanted to link what's going on in books, what's been going on with books, to the conversation about what's going on with films and the WGA to hopefully get more exposure on just how widespread this issue is and why there is so much hope, in my opinion. Well, there's a lot of hope, in my opinion, for indie, because the industries themselves are corrupt, and we've never been in a better time than ever for independent creators to find a way in without having the same roadblocks of the gatekeepers. And I think the gatekeepers of the industry have been doing a disservice to people for a very long time. It is not just in the last couple of decades where the gatekeepers have said, no, we don't want you up here. And that's also not to say that agents and editors from publishing houses haven't done some sort of job in somewhat quality checking sometimes. But I think that they get too much credit, because if you go and look back at even stuff from 15, 20 years ago, how many of the top novels that are contemporary are really that great? A lot of the stuff, even from, decades ago, are because they were written by people who had connections, who had money, and usually your way in was either luck or you knew somebody who could get you in. So it didn't always promise quality. And in more recent decades, not just in the last couple of years, but in decades, it is about tracing trends and trying to find what will make money. That's why you got a bunch of vampire things after Twilight. That's why you got the whole zombie trend. That's why you got the angels trend. That's why you got the dystopian trend. That's why you got the Fae trend. And it's a lot of trend chasing in order to push stuff out as fast as possible. And at the moment, we're getting a lot of smut and romantasy trending, because that's what's making money. But so we're going to talk about this specific diversity in things because it has affected and destroyed a lot of places, has been in a lot of places, and it does a disservice to literally everybody involved. It sells fake dreams. It discriminates against everybody. It still discriminates against the people that it is saying it is trying to help. And it devalues everybody's work. It's also an insult to anybody who is working hard, regardless of your race, because now it is putting the amount of work that you put into what you've done and what you've built and putting it into question, because was it just an initiative and your stuff really doesn't matter? But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. There are two ways to be featured here, and number one is through Lemoi, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in your guys' creativity as whatever you come up with using that prompt. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author with a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit the first chapter and the cover to the Fresh Meat feature, also located in the links down below, they will be read here on the channel at a random interval to hopefully help more readers find your work. And those are always Mondays, except for the first Monday when we do Lemoi. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, read them to your heart's content, or hopefully maybe find something that you really like, you can get them at any of your favorite places to get books, which includes the local library. I'm sure that I will need your support, because I'm pretty sure that any opportunities that I possibly ever wanted in the future are ruined by what I do on this channel. But you know what? I hope that at least people can love the things that I've created, at least at some point. With that said, let's get into the topic. So forced diversity has been a topic of discussion for a very long time in creative writing, and it's only really, the strangling has gotten worse and worse as it's gone spread and gotten much worse. Now you have in award ceremonies where it's required, or in award opportunities, it's required that you have a certain amount of people who work on your production fit into certain categories. Instead of being the best person for the job, it is now, we are going to do these quotas. But I gotta say, before we get into this other stuff, I know I've already done this intro, but I needed to show you this thing that I found while I was grabbing some of the articles I wanted to talk about today. The headline spawns sort of the discussion that we'll be having today and get into the meat of the topic because we got a lot of places to go through. So first is jumping over here to Film Threat with a veteran screenwriter's plot twist on Hollywood's DEI cultural shift by Anonymous, posted just 2 days ago from recording this. And thank you to the subscriber that sent this my way. I know many showrunners who hate this, not because they didn't want to hire new writers and foster them. They didn't want half their staff coming from a pool of inexperienced writers who knew nothing about working in the writer's room, production, posts, and deadlines. This is one of the things where I'm like, I know that there is some political stuff going on with the creation of shows and television right now. But I also think that there is a huge batch of bad writers who are misled on how to write a good story, how to tell a compelling story, and they're being thrust into a position in which they are being controlled because they want their opportunity. And a lot of people will do a lot of things in order to get that opportunity. But they're also not ready. Like, I've seen so many books that have also been published recently that are by young and inexperienced authors, but those authors want their chance at something. And so they obviously, if a publisher comes to you and says, hey, we want to give you this deal and publish your book, you're going to go for it. But publishers don't have your reputation, your stories in mind. They just want to use you for profit. So if they see that you are an opportunity for them to make a profit, they will sacrifice you at the altar of making a profit. And there goes your story. There goes your reputation. There goes your ability to learn, because they're just going to use you for as long as they can to make money and then discard you. Is this illegal? Probably, but hey, I'm not an attorney. And there's no way to find out anyway, because if you ask questions about this, you'll be labeled a racist or called out for your white male privilege, or in some cases, you'll just be called white fragility, which you'll see in some of the later articles. If you so much as raise an eyebrow, there's a risk that you'll never work again. This is why this is anonymous. And this is also why a lot of people will not talk about this issue. It is such a contentious issue. And like I said at the beginning of this, that I'm about to get in trouble, because you're really not supposed to talk about this stuff. Even if you're just like trying to have a candid, nuanced conversation, just bringing it up is going to bring trouble. This may not be obvious at first glance, but there seemed to be a lot of white dudes at the Golden Globes, right? Well, this doesn't impact the top 2% of writers, showrunners, and directors, since they're in the rarefied air where they get work no matter what. It's those of us with decades of experience working on some of your favorite TV shows and films that are now sitting on the sidelines waiting. No institution reinforces this more than the WGA. One glance at their monthly calendar of events shows the Latina Writers Community meeting, an LGBTQ Writers Committee meeting, a committee of Black Writers meetings, a Middle Eastern Writers Committee meeting, a Women's Writers Committee meeting, and an Asian American Writers Committee meeting, to name just a few. I think the AWP does it as well. Like, I did a video forever ago, the last time I went to AWP, and then like the couple of years after that, I went to AWP 2 years in a row. I think it was 2017 and 2018, because 2018 was in Tampa, and so I was like, well, I live in this area, so like, why not? And then after that, I kind of just looked at what the programming schedule was. If you look at AWP's programming schedule, you get so many things about specifically identity. You get so many things that focus on just those issues, on breaking people down into those things, on looking at things from a specific identity label lens. And then you also have, creative writing time for enter thing here. And so it's not just the WGA that is doing this and doing it so hard. It is also stuff like AWP. And AWP, in case you didn't know, is the American Writers and Writing Programs Association. And it is one of the biggest writing conferences in North America for writing and writing programs. So you also end up with a lot of universities there, university presses. So you're going to get a certain leaning. At the time that I first went, I was in a master's program for creative writing, getting a degree in fiction, and my university offered free admittance to a couple of people in the university. So, I signed up when it was in Washington, D.C., and then I signed up when it was in Tampa, and I was given free tickets to enter because it is freaking expensive. But this has been a thing for a very long time, and it has been enforced by institutions and structures and programs for a very long time. I constantly remember I will never forget the first time that I went when I was in Washington. The first time I went in Washington, D.C. was just after Donald Trump had been elected. Everybody was freaking losing their minds. And here we are. Was it 2016? No, it was 2017. Yeah, because it was in March. And Donald Trump had just been elected, had just become president a couple months prior. And so there were so many booths that were doing specifically anti-Trump stuff, selling anti-Trump stuff. And then there was a portion when I was walking through the booksellers room, because they have a very large booksellers room with lots of different booths for programs and writer-related things and small presses and all of that. And you get just this chain of people, this wall of people across the whole room that are just shouting, trying to make an anti-Trump point, statement, whatever. And there are different people at the booth being like, this is so dumb, because you know that we're all on your side and blah, blah, blah. You're just preaching to the choir, because they made it a very unwelcoming space for anybody who was not them. And they assumed everybody there was just like them. You kind of just kept your mouth shut if you had any thoughts whatsoever that were different, which is also kind of funny getting into any creative space. Is a lot of people that if you're in a creative space, they're going to assume that you agree with them. Kind of in the same way that if you're in any sort of space that has a political leaning period, where I've seen it in the right-wing spaces in some cases, like with Iron Age, that if you even slightly associate with any of this, they kind of all assume that you have the same politics, you agree on everything, and that if you disagree in any sort of way, then you must be the opposite. And I've run into this too when I'm critiquing books. And if I critique a right-wing person's book, I get assumed to be one side of the aisle completely politically and just trashed on. And these same people will not actually take any chance to go and see anything else I have to say to see where I land on anything. Because in the political sphere, you are all or nothing. You are all with us or you're all against us. So the assumption, if you are at a writing event like AWP, is that you agree on literally everything. And this is one of the ways that they isolate you and then vilify you and then throw you out. And we'll see this with Race Fail, with the RWA shit show, with what's happened in Stoker's So White. It's happened in so many places in the creative writing sphere, and they kind of just force you out by trying to find where you do not agree with them on even the smallest thing, to be like, not full compliance. That's where it's at. Anyway, so in AWP, they did a wall that was just shouting anti-Trump stuff in the middle of the room, and everybody was like, why are you doing this? It's just annoying everybody, because everyone's like, you're preaching to the choir, regardless of whether that was true or not. And there was one booth at that place that was like, so the bookseller room was hundreds of tables, close to 1,000 different numbered booths. And there was one there that was a man's magazine, a man's literary magazine for stories by men, about men, for men. I mean, technically you could be a female and write a story about that, but it obviously the submission process was going to dictate whether you got in there or not. And they preferred stuff that was geared towards men's stories. And by Saturday morning, their booth was graffitied and destroyed by people who went to that con, telling them to get out. But you had all of these women's magazines, feminist magazines, and you weren't allowed to have just this one that was for men's stories. So that was ridiculous, and I'll never forget that. And then I'll also remember one, this is where I discovered cartoons in the Suicide Forest and Triple X Seamus, and there was the Gothic Academy one, I can't remember what it was called, and a Confederacy of Hot Dogs, and the Jewish Anarchist Cookbook. Like, I got a bunch of books there. I got also a bunch of free books, because they just kind of throw them at you to be like, take them. We don't want to carry them back on the plane. But there was also a chick there who had recently come back from being abroad, and she was like in Norway or one of the Scandinavian countries. And we were just standing there talking, and she asked me, if I would sign up for her mailing list to, keep an eye open for when they're doing submissions. And it got to a point where she said something about how they had on one of their beer bottles, like these symbols that kind of reminded her of dream catchers or like runic things. It was something that reminded her of American Indian imagery. And she was saying how the Vikings had no right to use that imagery because it didn't belong to them. Well, number one, you're talking about the ancestors to the Vikings. I don't think claiming somebody's cultural artifacts is something that they're really going to be a problem with. But number two, are you not then dictating what a foreign culture does in their culture? Are you not being ignorant of a foreign culture because they're white, so you're making assumptions about them? It was just this whole thing, and we went back and forth, and she got so mad at me that she started arguing with me, called her friend over so that he could argue with me instead, took the sign-up sheet from on top of the table away, and then threw it away when I walked away after she had gotten all upset. Anyway, so like I will never forget my experiences at AWP because they were not good. And it was very biased. You get there and you're very uncomfortable if you are not of that disposition. Anyway, so this has been going on for a very long time, and they use anything that they can to try to push you out into the non-compliance area so then they can just force you out. Going back, I brought that up because they also had these little groups where you would meet by identity, which, you know, is fine if you have it open for literally everybody to do that and it's equal, but you don't. Now, can you imagine if there was a white writers committee meeting? We might be murdered. And the saddest part of all of this is that most of the people who would fill that room are some of the most liberal people I know, people who have gone out of their way to foster new and unique voices. Check out the WGA's own 2022 Inclusion and Equity Report and make your own conclusions on the WGA's priorities. Check out the WGA's 2022 Inclusion and Equity Report and make your own conclusions on the WGA's priorities on this. When creating a writer profile on the WGA's website, there is one box to check if you're heterosexual, three choices under transgender, and 6 under LGBTQ. Not sure what those statistics have to do with writing a great episode of The Witcher. This mindset was very present in the last in-house WGA meeting held before the strike of 2023. Every 3 years before we have a new deal with the studios, the negotiating committee sits on the stage and members throw the complaints at them. And God bless them, they sit there for hours on end listening to a bunch of writers bitch and moan like I'm doing. The complaints at these meetings over the last 2 decades are always the same. How do we get more money and more residuals? In 2023, the meetings had a decidedly different tone. Very few complaints had to do with money this time around. There was a litany of complaints about not enough diversity in the ranks. Young writers asking, how come I've worked for 2 years as a TV writer and I'm not a showrunner yet? A position that would take at least a decade of experience, if not 2, to reach. How do we make sure that the guild will fight for the staffing requirements? I always thought that to survive in this business, it's a yearly, monthly, and daily hustle. There are no guarantees, especially when it comes to staffing on TV shows. This is something that I've also seen with an entitlement of new writers and younger writers and writers that are fresh into being published, where they kind of assume that, hey, I'm just starting out and I'm having a hard time getting somebody to even look at my book after I send out a query. And then they accredit that to their demographics rather than it just being a very difficult industry for literally all of us. But then they go, but you're white, so it's completely different for you. No, it's difficult for all of us. And I understand that there are different types of obstacles for different kind of people. I'm not going to say that there are not, but I want to get into that as well, because I have seen articles and I have seen agents talking about how they see somebody's story about, hey, this is a Chinese immigrant story coming through during the gold rush, and it has a lot of that going in, and the agent says, oh, people are not going to be interested in that. Now, that's not actually saying whether or not the public would be interested in that kind of story. It is a lot of agents gatekeeping what they think the public is going to be interested in, and then the public being called racist because of what the agents have decided they're going to let go through. But these agents are the same people that are asking for like birdwatcher rom-coms because that's what they're feeling right now. Or these agents asking for freaking Housewives of Georgia, Atlanta, whatever. Housewives of Atlanta, but in book form, because that's what they're watching right now. And a lot of agents, if you go and look at like Query Finder and many of these places to look up agents, many of them, I don't know the percentage, but there is a good chunk of them that use being an agent and opening queries as a way to find specifically what touches their niche or what touches their interest, not necessarily what is going to sell. And then you've got the question of, well, there needs to be a balance, because you are always going to have a balance between what is commercially viable and like what is a passion project. Because if you look back at Cormac McCarthy, his first couple of projects were not popular, but the agent really, really liked his style, and it emulated a writer or was very similar to a writer that agent liked. And so that agent looked at McCormick's work and said, I'm going to support this because I want to see it succeed, and I support Cormac McCarthy in doing what he's doing. I think he's going to make something good. And a couple of books in, he got his final commercial success, and that made everything else that he'd written before a success. But sometimes it just takes somebody believing in your project and struggling through it And other times you're looking for like immediate commercial success. And it is a balance between the commercial success and the artistic voice that is going to be different than necessarily the commercial trend chasing that is what's going to make you a lot of money. But a lot of people, it seems like, when they're having these discussions about their success or the struggle in these very, very difficult industries, in these very competitive industries, it comes down to blaming race or blaming sexuality or blaming something outside of their hands and trying to use those things as a way, as a weapon to get ahead, which takes me over to Jessica V Aragon's Twitter account, which I referenced a couple months ago when I did a video about entitlement, because there is a huge entitlement problem among writers where they think their voice is specifically special. And don't get me wrong, I believe that every creator, everybody who is creating for the reason of creation and expression, you do have a unique voice that has to be fostered to come out. But this goes to an extreme extent of like, I am the only one suffering, I am the only one in this position, and everybody else that is of a specific disposition is obviously not struggling because that is a specific me issue. And you can't struggle to the same extent I can because I am a special kind of struggle. Like, that's what you see here. So with Jessica V here, I've spent the last year recording every English language fiction deal in Publishers Marketplace, Googling over 4,000 authors. And this is what the current book deal looks like. So we've got landscape looks like. So we've got no references for like author, like no spreadsheets for the authors, for the books, for the deals, for what is being looked for the breakdown of genres or anything, but you've got them breaking it down by race because nothing else freaking matters in this. And that is all that it is, by genre. And you will say that they will say that this is not freaking enough, but they won't meter like, okay, so you've got feeds, YA, and children's books are much less white than these up here. What does that mean for the submissions? That doesn't break down how many people are actually applying in these different or querying in these different genres with these different categories, but it's just saying that it's completely unfair. That doesn't necessarily mean that you are being discriminated against, but it also doesn't necessarily mean that you aren't being discriminated against. This is just not enough information, and agents and the publishing industry are made up of individuals that are all going to pick based on taste, based on what they want. And there are discriminatory practices that are, I want to help this person, and there are also discriminatory practices that I don't want to help that person. So it's just going to be there, but you can't make a decision off of this. Yet you see this biasness. And then you look at these separates. We're up here with Kyra Nelson. White readers, do this breakdown for the books that you've read this year. What percentage of your reading list is BIPOC? Your own reading list is the most important place to start. I mean, if that's how you want to do it. But for me, when I'm reading, I just read books that I'm interested in regardless of race. I'm not going to race test or purity test anything that I'm going to read. Down here, after reading this post and comments and retweets, I've been thinking what I, one white agent, can do with these numbers. Here's my decision. I am going to reopen for all genres I represent to only people of color writers. Once my unresponded queries number is under 200, I'll reopen again. So here we got discriminatory practices that are very in the open. Going back to here, what Film Threat was talking about with discriminatory practices based on race. Seeing the actual numbers laid out like this is so mind-blowing. If you're an author of color wondering if the world needs your voice or your stories, it absolutely desperately does. Guess what? If you're an author of any kind who has a vision, who has a dream, regardless of your race, if you've got this idea that you can't not write because you need to share it, because it's talking to you, because you feel like you have a story that you're the only one who can tell it, do it. The world needs you to create art. It doesn't matter what your demographics are. This isn't specific to anybody. And I'm not going to discourage anybody based on demographics. You are a unique voice out in the world if you are creating. Now I got my own hot takes about commercial versus art, but you know, that's a thing for another day. When we're here, we need to talk about how part of the reason why the lines between YA and an adult are blurred so bad, and we have the most 30-year-old, 17-year-olds ever, is because it's so much more friendly to marginalized authors who are almost 40% more likely to be published in YA as POC. But that doesn't tell you how many people are actually submitting in those other spaces, because I know that there are a lot of people submitting into YA in general. Leaving this here for the next time people claim diversity pushes are keeping white writers from publishing. Because other people are having success does not mean that other people are not meeting failure. Like Justine right here can specifically be disproven when you got an agent up here openly saying that she's discriminating against people based on race. So yes, some people are not getting published. Just because my neighbor gets published doesn't mean that I am somehow benefiting from that, because we're not related. This whole idea of this hive mind is so insane. Laura Galan Wells here, but don't agents say that they want to BIPOC work? I looked up 200 agent reps announcements from November 2021 to January 2022, so like 3 months, and 85% of the new clients were white, non-Latino, to the best of my knowledge. No perfect data, not perfect data. So you got all these people like freaking out and morality panicking about the demographics of people without actually doing good research on this. This person here freaking out that 3% Southeast Asian, but if you look up the population of Southeast Asians in America, it's just under 3%. So that is technically demographically relevant, but it's still not enough. And they're only looking at the number as opposed to it being a complete equity across the line, as opposed to a demographic representation. They only see the numbers. And so to me, that looks like a dominance game. It looks like something that is less about actually representing somebody and just wanting to use whatever you can as a way in the door, guilt people, force people, get ahead however you can. This is why I'll never shut up about needing more diversity in the stories being published. However, it's hard to move diversity through the system that loves its comfort trends and passes on books that stand out too much because of heritage storytelling and unique premises. Let me tell you, this is not just a single race or sexuality issue. This is something that happens to everybody if you write too far outside of what is currently trendy. Is they want stuff that follows the trends that they can sell quick and easy and relate to something quick and easy. And most unique ideas will hit that wall. An additional thing about this in the creative writing sphere and the querying sphere that has been mentioned and has been an ongoing issue is that agents have been testing or requesting specifically that you out yourself in specific ways, both between the sensitivity readers issue and just agents saying, hey, if you are a member of one of these groups, then mention it because I will actually care. And if you don't mention it, then you're probably just going into the dump. But that stuff asking for like your sexuality, if you have any disorders, if you have any physical ailments, if you have anything that they could use to count you as some sort of DEI sort of situation. And I've been saying this for years, that nobody should have to owe anybody their mental, physical, personal, any of their sexual backgrounds, none of your medical history, none of that personal information should come into whether or not you deserve a publishing deal. And it's actually very, very exploitive to not just demand it if you want a chance at being published, but then to use those personal details in order to sell a product. It is insanely insensitive. It is insanely disrespectful, and it is insanely invasive to consider that you should own and know a person's individual, like personal things in order for something to get published. And it's crazy that we're at this point where these people are going to claim how much they care about you, but they only care about you enough to ask for personal information to see if they can sell your personal information for their benefit. And then you have the bullying and the demands of people who publish things, and then you're said you're not allowed to write that thing or do that thing unless you fit that thing, and then it's demanding the background of the person to justify how dare they write that thing. And that includes outing somebody of their sexuality, outing somebody of their personal trauma in order to justify whether or not they should be left alone from your incessant bullying because some random somewhere is deciding that it is a moral haywire that somebody wrote about a trauma that for some reason you get to decide whether they get to write it. But yeah, this has been an issue for a while. Yeah, you could tell that this is a heated issue for me because it specifically puts a lot of people, not just in an uncomfortable situation, not just in a justifiably bad situation, because it's like, oh, you want to bother me about my medical history, about my personal partners or lack thereof, about anything about me, just in order to sell books for you where I get the lame cut, possibly. Obviously never because of who I am. But that's just in the first world. Let's think about agents that are trying to reach out into other countries and ask people in other countries, because they're also doing the underrepresented thing, but you also then have to out what you are personally, and it could be actually a dangerous situation in the countries in which these people reside. Like it is, there are so many insane levels, and to make it about the person, which kind of goes into the situation now where so many, not just YouTubers, but a lot of people are selling themselves as a person instead of like the books. And I understand how important it is to make yourself stand out. But at some point, this business isn't about books or storytelling anymore. It's about selling personalities that people want to use in order to tell you what to do. Especially when it comes to, hey, buy my thing. And then people buy your thing, but they don't talk about the thing because they don't care about the thing. They're buying the thing because they care about the message, or they care about the person. And they're supporting that. And you see that right now with the current culture war BS, where it's, hey, I don't really care about this comic. I haven't actually read this comic, and whatever, but I support the message. It's the same thing as, I didn't go and see that Disney movie, but I am paying for the ticket because I support the politics. And that is why a bunch of our arts are in the garbage, because if y'all putting this stuff that's not storytelling, that's not where we can actually find common ground at the forefront, and instead only lifting up saviors if they have your same politics. It's weak. It's weak sauce. It's destroying everybody, and y'all are stomping on artists. So, I'm not playing anymore. I'm not. If you're going to play this game, I will find you, and I will not consider you legitimate. Respectfully. So, getting out of what are the current panics going on in the publishing industry and among publishing talks especially, you had the race fail of 2009. And race fail was the name given to a large entangled snare of racism, misunderstanding, cultural clash, bad behavior, and hurt, which consumed several interconnected corners of a fandom in 2009. So the way that Race Fail started was actually on a live journal blog where somebody put up a blog post about how to write characters that are unlike yourself, how to write like a different race or a different culture that is unlike yourself. Her two recommendations for this were to treat somebody who is unlike yourself demographically as if they are a human, as if they are a person, treat them with respect and dignity, and to research the culture and background of that culture in order to best write it, to the best of your abilities. Those were her two recommendations. And this woman, because she was white and suggested it, she was called a racist. And this just blew things up into how the sci-fi fantasy industry was super racist, and even saying what this woman said was super racist. And they all kind of just fought with each other over that specific thing. And just a couple of years ago, because I remember where I was working, it was Christmas Eve when I saw RWA shit show trending, and I switched to jobs, I think the year after that. So I'm pretty sure it was 2017. The RWA shit show hit, which was the fight within the Romance Writers of America Association. And they were going off about how some members had liked Tucker Carlson tweets, had liked Candace Owen tweets, had liked what's his face tweets, the guy with the little face. They meme his face so small. I don't remember what his name is. So this author had liked some tweets by that variety of considered conservative talking people. And so others in the RWA, or fans of the RWA, or Courtney Milan, who was not a fan of the RWA, was not a part of the RWA, but wanted to pick a fight with the RWA, started going on about how the RWA was racist, and then started dragging this woman, then going through her books to find anything that they could to call her a racist. One of the things they called her a racist with was how she had a mixed race character in the book who had dark skin and green eyes, and they called that racist because they were like, what, aren't dark eyes good enough for you? Even though the green eyes were relevant to her background, that didn't really matter because they were just trying to throw a hissy. This resulted eventually, the whole thing, and then people kind of started picking sides. People went in to defend the political freedom to like who you like, to enjoy and believe the things that you enjoy and believe. But it was obviously, you're a white supremacist if you believe these things or do these things. And over here, it's like, it's just Tucker Carlson. It's just mainstream, whatever. We know how it was in 2017, 2018. This resulted in a majority, if not almost all of the RWA's board resigning because of claims of racism from everybody. It got mostly replaced, and they changed the name of the awards to the Vivians because they determined that the previous name, the Ritas, was also racist. But very briefly from this Susan M. Sobel post, I can't talk about the RWA anymore. It's depressing on so many levels. The racism, the power play, the ineptitude, the underhandedness, the backstabbing, the bigotry, all of those things. If you need a refresher, just look at the RWA shit show on Twitter and take a gander. Over here, we have Melanie Malson posting for the Romance Writers of America in regards to the abrupt canceled 2020 Rita Award. I held back saying anything when this garbage first happened, actually posted my disgust but removed it. But now that the contest was canceled and many authors' hopes crushed, I'll speak up. The award was canceled due to the people crying that the winners of the 2019 awards weren't diverse enough. Excuse me, but what the actual frick? They stated, and I have the statement, that in no certain terms said that too many were straight white women were chosen and not enough women of color or LGBT. And here I thought authors were judged solely on their writing abilities. My bad. I cannot express my disgust at how utterly ridiculous this is. When I applied for membership of the RWA, they actually asked you on the application what your sexual preference is. What? I thought we weren't supposed to see color or sexuality, yet they want to know this because being anything but LGBT nowadays is seen as an abomination. It was presented that they should keep all personal knowledge about the contestants hidden to create unbiased judging, but it was disregarded. Their recent statement said that they plan to change their judging rules in the future contests to include a more diverse group, so apparently judging authors by the color of their skin and sexuality. I am a writer. Judge me on my writing prowess, my characters, and my storytelling abilities. This is a horrific act of cowardice and segregation. Shame on them. I truly wish I could withdraw my membership. Feel free to share. This deserves to go viral. This is not fair to any romance author, nor will it be in the future. So we've already had what is going on here. Meanwhile, you've got people like Rachel, Nicole here, who are and were kind of a huge part of the opposing side in the RWA shit show that were throwing a fit, and you'll see the kind of vitriol and racism, which is actually very prominent in these associations because of this kind of thing. And it's exactly the kind of thing that Film Threat is talking about and is warning about, and how it's kind of pervaded everything. This is what I wanted to share. So Rachel Nicole says, I've been lurking here for a while. This was posted on the Pan Forum, which I assume is another writers association of sorts. I've been lurking here for a while, mostly just getting an overview of the vitriol, and to be honest, because that's so much of what this is, vitriol, but I'm posting below in an attempt to get through to the people who need to hear this. CW, there are some hypothetical microaggressions / suppositions and racism examples listed to illustrate concepts. So from one cisgendered white woman to another, here are some things that I thought might be helpful if you're feeling upset at being called a racist. I mean, yeah, let's start this off by, being condescending, because somehow you think you're at some moral high ground in order to flick your nose at other people, but whatever. You can look at why this is and how you can look at why that is happening to you and how you can stop it from happening in the future. First and foremost, I am writing because I think and I hope that you can do better, that you can be better, that you can help us save this organization. I cannot get over how condescending these people are. And how they think that it is their job to tell you how to be, and that, hey, it doesn't matter what you think, you are what I tell you that you are, and you're going to do what I need you to do, or else you're going to hell. That is literally what this is. I'm pretty sure that if a religious person approached these people and said, hey, you need to do what I say, and like, you might say that you're not a sinner, but let me tell you why you're a sinner, and if you don't do exactly as I say, you are going to die in a burning fire somewhere. Do you think that they would be like, oh my gosh, please save me? Or do you think they would say fuck off? Or do you think that they would tell them to bugger off? Because I've got a feeling of how that conversation would go. I am only specifically naming racism here, no anti-LGBT viewpoints or ableism or the other forms of bigotry that many of our marginalized members are facing, because a lot of what I say below applies to all forms of bigotry. Systemic racism is currently at the fore of what is hindering the organization that is supposed to be about love. This post isn't meant to be exclusionary to other marginalized groups within our ranks. It is simply to address one facet of the problem. I also use the examples below for a black person rather than any person of color, because black members make up a greater amount of our membership than any other people of color. But note that anywhere below where it says black, it just as easily could be Indian American, Asian American, Latino, etc. Number one, if you think you're a racist, it likely wasn't your fault that you got that way. Not isn't, but wasn't. Racism is systemic, meaning that it's built in a system. Bigotry of all kinds, including racism, is taught. Bigotry is a byproduct of society, and if you are finding that you are what you are saying and if you find that you are saying things that other people are pointing out as racist, understand that it can be from the way that you were raised, the place that you live, the society around you, and a combination of those other factors, and not anything inherently wrong with what's inside of you. Being racist is wrong, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there is something wrong with you. That it is important distinction because when you are called out for racism, we take it very personally. It is not a personal attack. It is pointing out ways that you are failing to do better. It is a criticism of your racist thoughts, words, or actions. Often, though not always, it is not the actual criticism of you, so don't receive it or react to it like it is a personal attack. Please note that I am not saying that staying a racist isn't your fault, because it totally is. Being called out on being a racist and saying racist things using racist language and then not stopping is a problem. After being told that you are being hurtful or problematic and then continuing to do so, that's on you. Mostly skipping the rest of this because it's going to say, hey, knowing somebody black and having a black friend, husband, child, whatever, it does not make you not a racist. Something garbage about microaggressions, because if you're not being overtly racist, they want to be able to call you covertly racist. Now there's the good news that you can be unlearned. You can repent for your racism, but also finishing on this whole thing, though, is the important part where it says, like with many bad or wrong things, the only way to undo them is to first realize that there is a problem. Arguing that you aren't a racist isn't going to help, not to the people who are arguing with you, and certainly not yourself. So stop arguing and just listen. So they want to disarm you, name you things, and then say, hey, just deal with it, accept what I have called you, and do as I say to fix it. Again, would you listen to a religious person coming up to you and saying, you are a sinner, you are an abomination, listen to me so that we can fix this problem? Don't argue, because arguing won't get you into heaven. I'm just saying. I see some similarities here. Anyway, also getting on this, we got lit agent landscape diversifies some as anxieties over book businesses grow. So according to Publishers Weekly, in 2023, we've got the results of this year's Association of American Literary Agents biannual membership survey indicate that agency sectors of the book business is diversifying more rapidly than its counterpart in the publishing houses. Still, the sectors remain predominantly white, and other issues, including anxiety over the state of the book business, burnout, and inequity of pay of agents of color, remain a concern for members. So again, it's very heavily painted by racial demographics specifically. In 2023, the AALA once again found the vast majority of respondents identify as white, cis, female, straight, and without disabilities or chronic conditions. However, this year's respondents are slightly more diverse as they were 2 years ago. You know what? All you got to do is just let me let me bring it to you real close. Like, come in here. Come in here. You want to diversify your backlist of like employees. Apparently, all you got to do is give them. Now I don't want anybody in the industry to know this because it will screw over like everybody. But to diversify your workforce, all you've got to do is give them a mental illness. You can just hit depression, neurodivergent, anything. And suddenly you're more, just a little bit of abuse to create enough mental disturbance that, we can get you diagnosed, seized. Problem solved. You're welcome. In 2023, the AALA once again found the vast majority of respondents, are white. However, this year the respondents are slightly more diverse than they were 2 years ago. Some 83.1 respondents identified as white Caucasian, a notable decrease from the AALA's 2021 that found 88% of respondents identified as white Caucasian. In comparison, PW's own salary survey of publishing industry workers, which took 3-year hiatus during the height of COVID pandemic, found that 84% of respondents identified as white in 2019 and 83% identify in 2022. In addition, the AALA survey found that the 4 highest BIPOC groups in 2023 are Latino with 6.4%, Asian, Native Hawaiian, Southeast Asian 5%, biracial, multiracial at 4.6%, and Black, Afro-American, Afro-Caribbean 4.1%. And notably, the percentages of all BIPOC groups increased since 2021. AALA's officials say that the jump is due in part to changes in the AALA membership categories and the works of literary agents of change, LAOC. to support agents of color. Nonetheless, overall BIPOC representation is still low, an AALA release states, adding the perceptions of the organizations and industry are predominantly white. The number of respondents identifying as gender fluid or non-binary more than doubled since 2021 to 7%. For those under 40, the survey found. Look, the other way to solve that is just everybody needs to identify as David Bowie, and your gender identifying situation, it will be diversified. And I bet you will not have a difficulty finding women who want to dress like David Bowie. I'm just saying, you're welcome. That is a second business tip given to you by me. I am also not a credible source for business advice. The AALA survey also found that more young people are becoming agents, with respondents between 30 and 40 years old overwhelmingly constitute the single largest age group in 2023 compared to 2021, when the 40-50-year-old range dominated. More important key takeaways: the number of agencies allowing some remote work rose from nearly 60% from 37.7 in 2021. 72.2 respondents cited the consolidation of publishers as a concern. 37.4 of respondents reported working 40 to 60 hours a week. 15.2 reported 50 to 60 hours a week, and 9.6 reported that work weeks are more than 60 hours. A quarter of respondents reported burnout actively interfering with their ability to enjoy their jobs, including 35% of the 30 to 40-year group, and 12% worrying about their ability to remain in the publishing industry should a burnout continue at this level. 23% of white respondents reported no burnout compared to 5% of BIPOC respondents, with 9% of white respondents indicating worries over their ability to remain in the industry because of burnout, compared to 21% of BIPOC respondents. 68.9% of all respondents point to low salaries as a crucial issue in the agent world, including 90% of respondents in 30 to 40 age group. Look, 30 to 40s are just having a very rough time in general with having salaries that can pay for, a normal life and be able to not live in your parents' basement. That's just the reality of most jobs at this point for 30 to 40 year olds. Most of us are struggling. 59% of BIPOC respondents are under 40 years old, compared to 67% majority of white respondents of above 40. 22% of BIPOC respondents earn over six figures, compared to 42% of white respondents. 22% of respondents report receiving over 100 queries per week. The survey drew a total of 221 respondents, comprising of 48% of the total AALA membership. So not even half. My guys, this is not a very good survey. It's not very reliable for anything. But if you want to check out this information, all of it will be linked down in the description below. As I mentioned briefly, we're just going to touch on it so I could show you just how pervasive this is. So while we had the RWA shit show and the race fail of 2009, 2016 to 2018 had Stoker's So White, where there was the same thing going on in the horror community, where they said, hey, why are all of these people white? Why are white people winning awards? You guys are a bunch of racists. And so again, they switched it up. And if you go and look at the nominees for the Stoker Awards, every year they are more and more and more diverse, and you have to question whether or not that is genuine or whether it is a political move, because it has been so politicized that it ends up confusing whether somebody earned the position or whether you're just doing things in order to not be called racist. And that is one of the risks of acting in this way. Another symptom of this also happened last year, as author was booted from the HWA Horror Writers Association over racist transphobic rant. And this was a very well-known writer in the HWA. On Tuesday, the Horror Writers Association announced that it had decided to expel Thomas M. Moltelone, 76, from its membership and ban him from future events run by the organization. Montalone, who has written dozens of novels and edited the popular Borderlands horror anthology series since the 1980s, had previously been honored with multiple prestigious Bram Stoker Awards from the HWA, including with one of its 2016 Lifetime Achievements Awards. But a statement from the group condemned Montalone's recent words and actions, adding that the HWA's trustees do not condone hate speech in any way, shape, or form. We stand in support with our members' rights to feel safe, welcome, and above all else, respect. The statement continued, adding that the ban on Montalone had been made in accordance to the anti-harassment policies. The statement, as usual, did not provide any details of precisely which of Montalone's words had offended, but the organization had come under pressure over the complaint from other authors about his posts on social media. So again, we're going to do mob violence in order to push people out for not towing a line, for not thinking the same way. And this is a very common thing, even among like niche audiences or alt audiences. They still try to get you to believe and push what they believe. And if you do not do that, then they're going to push you out. And I have found that I've had a very difficult time in general with talking about issues, because people will come to you for one thing and expect like your alliance in everything. And then you fall short to them because they expect you to do and think everything that they do. And they get mad at you if you don't think in that way. I know on this channel, I try to have discussions. I don't expect anybody to agree with me. I don't expect anybody to think the way that I do, but I do want to present the topics to try to encourage actual discussion. And we might not agree, but I can still respect somebody's opinion if they actually try to have a conversation where we disagree, but can still respect that we're coming at stuff differently. I know I might make jokes, but generally I can still respect it if somebody is different than me, as long as they're not a complete bunghole. But using your whatever power you've accumulated or whatever good grace you've accumulated, or, you know, getting a group of your friends together to gang up on somebody, to try to end their career, to try to kick them out, to try to defame them, is actually a problem. And it's happening right now in Comicsgate as well, which just problems. It is particularly saddening to see someone who is considered a legend in the field reveal themselves to be a racist, transphobic, and bigoted as Montalone has, thriller author Alan Baxter wrote in an open letter. According to an overview of the saga published in sci-fi fanzine File 770, much of the outrage began in the last week when Montalone posted on Facebook about why he believed author Stuart David Schiff deserved his own Lifetime Achievement Award from the HWA. The zine quoted Montalone as writing, "That said, and despite the last few LAA years looking very much like a very obvious DEI project, that is diversity, equity, and inclusion, I am compelled to nominate a smart white old guy, Stu Schiff." The post reportedly attracted over 800 comments before it was taken down, with some agreeing with his sentiments and others that called him to apologize. So it's like, hey, I've noticed this thing and I'm gonna comment on it. Like, y'all are bragging about this is what you're doing anyway. But if you actually comment on it in a negative way, in a critical way, or say I'm going against it, then they come for you. Like, they know what they're doing. Montalone then appeared to double down on his views on a YouTube live stream on Monday titled "Facebook Has AIDS with Tom Montalone." Montalone said that he would not apologize and still intended to attend the HWA's upcoming StokerCon. He went on to bemoan the odd posturing he'd seen at previous iterations of the event, where one award was given to a fat black chick, calling his words an honest reportorial description. This is who she is. The person described by Montalone identifies as non-binary and does not have she/her pronouns. Diversity is great as long as it's not diversity of opinion, Montalone continued. I'm not allowed to believe that the last 3 years of these awards have been severely skewed toward people who have been in the past, toward people that have been in the past called, quote, marginalized, he said. Oh, wow, you've been writing while Indian? We're going to give you an award. You've been writing while black? You get an award. No problem. You're a female and you're not a white male? You get one. He went on to brag that he won't call anybody that's a single entity they, adding, whoever came up with this nonsense needs to be taken out into the back and beaten with a rubber hose because it's bullshit. It's total bullshit. And despite the backlash, Montalone maintained that he was not worried about the uproar from wokesters who hate him. I have a very healthy ebook royalty coming in every month for the last 4 years of my stuff. So, you know what the rest of them can do? They can suck it. I've apologized to those I personally offended on the dumb podcast, and everyone accepted my mea culpas. As far as my beliefs, the HWA has tilted left and politicized itself, and I can't shy away from that opinion. In many ways, I am relieved to be apart from the organization I am no longer feeling part of anyways. That's it. So again, like, you don't have to like what people say. I have to listen to what people say about things that I believe or experiences that I've had in my life that I don't agree with all the time. One of the most common things that I see insulted, I mean, aside from any religious talk, because you get so much vitriol regarding religion, but one of the things that I see a lot is homeschooling. And I see people going at homeschooling all of the time for it being inefficient, for it being about, like, for it being used for cultism, which sure, there are people that are abusive in homeschooling, but there are people who are abusive in public schooling as well. There are people in private schooling who are abusive. You can have good and bad, but I have lived with all of the bad assumptions about homeschooling and made about me and made about my parents, and made about my mom, who was my teacher. But I, and like, I guess depending on who you are, you're going to see this in different ways, but I have 3 master's degrees. I went to college early because I was homeschooled. I graduated early. So like, say what you want to say, but I get to listen to people say mean things about me, about who I am, about how I was raised, about my beliefs without knowing anything about me all the time. And it's just something that you do. I get to listen to people disagree with me all the time. I get to call myself an idiot and listen to other people correct me all the time. It's just something that it's fine. And you don't have to make everybody agree with you. Like, this goes back to at some point when I said, I feel like people are not used to being made uncomfortable by just disagreeing. And it can be hard. I understand that. Even sometimes when I look at my comments and I feel like, even sometimes when I look at my comments on YouTube and I feel like whatever I said was completely misunderstood. And I'm sure that that'll happen with this video too, because it's such a sensitive like topic. But I feel like sometimes, no matter how clear I am, my intention is taken a bad way, an incorrect way. I'm personally insulted for it. I have some people that have tried to like very gently correct me because they think it's their job to gently correct me in the right direction because they're a man and I'm a woman. And like, that's a job for only my husband, if he ever finds me. But I get that all of the time. And it's okay to interact with people that you disagree with. But if it's so much that you have an emotional reaction that you can't, or that you don't feel respected, because I bet Thomas Montalone here doesn't feel respected by the people that jumped on him, just like the people that he disagrees with or doesn't see the way that they live as legitimate or as something that he's going to acknowledge, they don't feel respected by him. It goes both ways, which means you can just exist without actually doing anything with each other, without being near each other, and you just get over it. There are people that I really have no interest in talking to ever because of the way that they think, and they can go and do their thing over there, but I'm just not interested. It comes down like all of the stuff with the AI bros when they come in here and try to tell me that AI isn't theft or that, you know, property rights shouldn't exist and so they should just be able to steal whoever's intellectual property that they want. Like, there's no conversation that can be had there. So I don't care. Somebody that comes in and wants to see everything through a political lens, like, your perspective is legitimate, but that's not how I'm viewing anything. If you're going to take what I say in a completely different direction, like, thank you for stopping by and sharing your thoughts, but I don't think that we're going to like find any common ground because we're coming at it from such a different disposition, from just such a different perspective that it's just immobile. And I think a lot of people have forgotten that you can just agree to disagree and move on. And if it's not that, because some of these people I don't think are that innocent. I think some of them are literally like, I have the power, I can control you, I can kick you out because I'm in the position of power if I just say these things. So very briefly, I want to talk about diversity in publishing, the age of Black Lives Matter, because this was a very, very big thing in 2020, specifically with the riots. And I don't know if anybody who is from the film threat situation knows about this or was aware of this, had the same thing going on in their area. I don't know if anybody who has joined me since then is aware of this, or people who are outside the publishing industry knows that this was going on. So during the Summer of Love, with all of the riots, there were a lot of agents who were shutting down all of their submissions for only Black Lives Matter to submit, for only certain races to submit, a bunch of people offering free services only for a certain number of races, which, you know, do what you want to do, but don't pretend that it's not discrimination. There were also a bunch of people that were kind of being bullied or forced into posting black blocs on like Instagram to show their support, and if you didn't do it, then you were smeared as a racist within the writing community. In 2020, I was actually a part of a local writing organization, and I was a reference for that organization. Like, they had me doing notes for stuff. They had me setting up being the tech person for that stuff because we started obviously doing long distance broadcasting because of COVID, and I was the digital person for that. And at some point, the group leader asked if we should make a statement, or the group leader asked if the club should make a statement about BLM, because of what was going on. And I said, it is a writing organization. We do not need to make a statement. We do not need to take a side. It only will prove to alienate people, because this is not a political organization. It is just for writers. And it would be my position on that situation that would eventually get me kicked out of the group because somebody else decided to cry. And I was just not considered I was considered less valuable than her. So I just kind of got kicked out. So there was a lot of this force being used to comply in certain ways, and you were never going to get anywhere if you did not. You were going to get blacklisted from the industry. You were going to get kicked out of any of these writing groups. You were going to get kicked out of the small writing communities or focused on if you did not participate in this stuff. And a lot of people are generally very scared to talk about this stuff because it can ruin your career. Because if you're a literal nobody and you make a statement, you're on that island all by yourself. Like, I am so tiny. It would not be difficult to destroy me. I kind of just figure I don't have a chance at a future anyway, because everything I do ends up failing. So you know what? Why not? Why not just make it worse for myself? I think that what I've said on this channel obviously screws over probably any possibility of anything in my future, even stuff that is in completely different industries, because I think I just say stuff that it's not fire retardant. It's the opposite of, it's flammable. I say a lot of flammable stuff. That's what I'm looking for. But I'm just reporting on that this was specifically happening and pointing out that people feared this and that you couldn't even hold a different position because people will use emotion to manipulate the results that they want. Whether they truly feel those emotions or not, they let those emotions dictate what should happen to other people because they are irrational and or controlling. I don't have anything better for that. Now, that's not to say there is not discrimination in certain ways against certain people. Going here with New PEN America report, deep and persistent obstacles in publishing houses impede greater diversity in terms of authors and stories told. So I want to focus on the key findings area, where the practice of basing financial investment is specific titles on comps based on other authors of color or of similar backgrounds entrenches inequities in that prior titles were likely not supported well enough to achieve their full potential. So that's focused on, hey, did this sell well? No, then we're probably not going to do it again. That is not specific to races. That is just in general. It happens a lot across races, more about the ideas of the books. Now, if you write your books about race, about a personal situation, then you're more likely to be compared to others that did the same thing, and they're going to go, did this make money, or is this going to be a money pit? And publishing is a business. As much as I talk about it is an art, when you're working especially with publishers, it is a business. And so they're going to look at making money. And I'm sorry, but I think that's also where indie flourishes, is that you don't have to worry so much about making that money. Is you can tell the story that you want to tell without this pressure, without being told you have to change stuff in order to be more profitable. You also end up with an identity trap, pigeonhole authors of color who are viewed as positioned only to write their racially oriented subject. I've seen this too, where many people have complained about having to write a certain storyline a certain way because they are a certain race, and they are told that is all that they are allowed to write. Authors of color can face the conundrum of being expected to write books that represent their culture, but also being urged to reach beyond that niche audience. So again, it's putting unfair expectations on people who don't want to write about identity. Publishers continue to subscribe to the tacit one is enough rule, in which a single book by an author of a particular background or focused on a certain ethnic group can foreclose future interests in a title that addresses ostensibly similar subjects. I don't know how true that is, because so many of the freaking books I read on the ALA last year and for the year before that were all of the same freaking similar things. So I have no idea about that. But I think that has more to do with sales, because like if there's not a whole lot of interest in it, then the one and done is going to be it. But like currently, YA cannot get enough freaking fairy smut forced marriage. So you know what? If it sells, then you're probably good. If it doesn't sell, then they're probably like, yeah, this is enough for now. We'll try this again later, maybe. Long tenures and low turnover rates in publishing limit advance opportunities for staffing, delaying the diversification of leadership ranks and constraining the influence of editors and other publishers of color within the houses. So that just sounds like the industry is suffering, which means people are not being promoted. And so then we're not able to manipulate the industry as fast as we like because the industry is suffering. That's just everybody, sweetie. Like everybody is sucking. Everybody is sucking. Anyway, so there is a lot of stuff going on and has been going on with this forced situation in the creative fields, in creative writing, and it is part of what I think is killing the creativity. Like, it doesn't matter if you're doing commercialization or if you're forcing demographics where it doesn't even make any sense. This is, I think, one of the reasons why Comicsgate even happened, is it was against the DEI inside of the comics community, in the comics organizations. And it doesn't help anybody. One of my main things that I want to do here, and I try to do with this channel, is one, bring conversations forward to be had, even if they're kind of flammable. Because, like, what hope do I have anyway? So, you know what, who cares? I have enough thick skin that I at least can deal with being called an idiot, because I call myself one anyway, because I'm constantly learning. And you know what? I accept that. I want to try to have conversations about difficult subjects and to try to find the answer to this stuff. And it turns out that when you bring this stuff forward in kind of a respectable manner, even when it's sketchy, if you don't engage with the flaming stuff, then you can actually sort of start discussing the problem and finding other people like you, even if you don't fully agree on things. And so what I try to do with this channel, especially with these Saturday videos, is bring these topics forward, try to discuss them, even if I don't have the ideas right. I'm not trying to be right. I'm not trying to debate anyone. I just want to talk about the issues that we're seeing, and hopefully maybe someday in the future we can find a resolve for this. So I'm not saying one person is more right than others, but I'm telling you what I have seen across the writing industry, across the publishing industry, as somebody who was in university for writing in 2016, 2014 through 2016, and then have been in the periphery of the industry, watching the industry from the outside and watching trends, kind of how people are accepted into the industry. For the last couple of years, I have people that I know or who have contacted me from different organizations talking about what they see in different organizations. And obviously I, saw the RWA shit show going down on Twitter when it was going down on Twitter. But I like to keep my eye on things, and I like to watch how things are going. And more importantly, I want to encourage everybody that if you have a story to tell, explore what you need to explore. Tell the stories that you need to tell, because a lot of this stuff is trying to force creators and authors not to express themselves, to say these words are correct, these words are not correct, these ideas are correct, those ideas are not correct. And you can't write about the human experience by censoring the human experience. So regardless of your background, regardless of your race, regardless of your sex, regardless of anything, write the stories that you have to tell, explore the stories that you have to tell. Explore the stories that you have to tell. Try to tell them to the best of your abilities. Hopefully, and I pray for you, that you find somebody that can help you bring your skills, bring your storytelling skills up to the next level so that you can tell them even better than you imagined before. Because if you are creating, if you have that mind to do so, your stories, somebody is looking for your story and they don't know it yet. And I believe in you, and I want to see the creative people prosper. I want to see the new stories come out. I want to see what you make that you haven't made yet. And I don't want to see the creativity that is just pushed down because there are all of these things, from the corporations to the social pressure to the you'll never get anywhere because we're going to hold you down from not complying with our social or political ideas. And we're going to politicize every trope that you choose to use, whether it is for us or against us. We are going to steal it and claim it as our own symbol. I want to say, forget it. I don't read politically. I choose not to read politically. I know some people choose to read politically, but you don't have to. And I think it becomes dangerous when you start seeing everything in that way and start sorting everything in that way. And I hope at the very least this video and the discussion that maybe not will come after this can sort of eventually change things in the future. So with that said, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Are you an author who has struggled with this kind of discrimination? Well, I mean, it's going to be so sketchy to leave any comments on this. I understand. It's okay. But have you seen this kind of thing going on? Where have you seen this kind of thing going on? If you are an author and you have queried or not, if you feel comfortable enough to share, like, have you been pigeonholed before? Have you had any negative experiences with critique groups that are like this, where you have been unfairly treated? Because I think that there is definitely unfair treatment and pigeonholing and mistreating people because of their race all of the time in all of these different sectors. But it's also very difficult to actually report on because, as Film Threat said, like, you will get kicked out and or you're not really allowed to say anything. And it can benefit you or it can be against you. The final thing that I want to say about the DEI stuff is that it has been hitting everybody very hard for at least a decade now, probably more than that, but it has been ramping up and hitting everybody hard and hitting every industry. And it's making a lot of people very, very frustrated for good reason. It's making people frustrated on all sides of the issue, with many people feeling like they are being discriminated against because they aren't white, and with many people feeling they are discriminated against because they are white. There are people across races who feel like they are being generalized, who are feeling like they are being disrespected because of the way that they are being treated in the industry in multiple ways. Like, Slay is a completely disrespectful book, and somehow it's pushed to the top. And how did that woman get a job with freaking DC Marvel? It is disgusting how bad of a writer she is, how disrespectful of a writer she is, and she's at the top of this game. I don't know how that happens. And then it sets the idea that everybody who gets this kind of job is just there and skillless, because they're letting in a lot of skillless people for a lot of different ideas. And then it ends up turning all of the conversation into everybody in whatever group sucks at writing, which is why they should ever be allowed to write. And then everybody just gets even more angry because people who didn't do anything are also now being insulted and lumped in with groups because of demographics that they can't control. So then it's just turning into a big old pile of frustration. Everybody is frustrated. Everybody is angry. And it feels like this is going to come to a point where the reaction is like going over the top in the reaction, because the response to it is so over the top because it has been so bad. And I just want to caution anybody. I understand how easy it would be, and I understand how frustrated people are, because I've been frustrated seeing this stuff going on too. But I also want to caution anybody about lashing out or mistreating people based on a demographic when they haven't done anything to you. The institutions that are doing this, the institutions that have defaced and disgraced and destroyed legacy media or legacy stories, or stories that were super popular before and that were beloved before, those stories still exist. But it is not every single person in any specific demographic that has ruined those things. It is the corporations that are in control. And so I urge everybody who is feeling frustrated, who has felt hopeless because of this, number one, it is not hopeless. It is never hopeless. There is more hope now than ever to have your independent voice get out there and be as clear as possible. I do think that work hard to find somebody that can help you polish your voice to the best of your abilities, to tell the best story that you can, and work together to get that stuff out there, if that is how you feel like what you feel you need to do. But I also caution people against overreacting and generalizing against everybody, which turns into mistreating everybody when they haven't done anything wrong. It is so easy to feel justified in the abuse and mistreatment of others when you've seen abuse and mistreatment, and then you start associating certain tags or certain beliefs with certain kinds of things. And so then it's like, well, I can mistreat you because you act like this. And I know that I'm not perfect. I know that I make some generalizations, and I don't speak the best, and I make mistakes. But I do try my hardest to not mistreat people that have not mistreated me. And I think this DEI stuff, because they have especially been so abusive and so controlling, which we've seen in multiple samples throughout this video and in so many more samples, I know that you guys watching this have experienced some form of abuse or discrimination or something on that spectrum because of this stuff. And I know how easy it is to respond to this stuff in kind, because you're like, I have the power now. But I urge you against doing that. It's one thing to say and have your piece against somebody and to take a stand and to gatekeep, like I talked about earlier in this video. But it is another thing to like smack the face of somebody who has not actually done something to you because you're making assumptions. And I say that as somebody who gets assumptions made about me all the time. I get assumptions about my political stance. I get assumptions about whether I'm male or female. I get assumptions about my religion. I get assumptions about my education. I get assumptions about all sorts of things. It's just like, why? And then I get judgments based on those. And so just be careful that you don't let your emotions guide you into abusing others and then feeling like you're right just because at some point you were also abused. Appreciate that you were checking out this video. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend and don't die. This is a mistake, isn't it?
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out? The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him. Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?